When you build wealth with Sagicor Investments, you never have to settle for less than your dreams. Call 888-SAGICOR to speak with a wealth advisor so Sagicor Investments can help you create, grow, and preserve your wealth.
Good evening, viewers. Welcome and thank you for joining us for the fourth staging of the Sagicor Investments MoneyTalks series. For the next hour and a half, 90 minutes, Sagicor Investments will engage you in a discussion on the topic Money Talks, the 2023-24 National Budget and Investments. If you're joining online via Facebook, Instagram, or Zoom, you can follow the discussion by using the hashtags MoneyTalks, Sagicor Investments, Investor Briefing. Stay tuned for an insightful evening, and of course, get ready to answer the social media giveaway questions. We begin with the Vice President, Capital Markets at Sagicor Investments, Mishka McLeod-Hines, to do the welcome. Mishka?
Christopher Zacco, President and CEO, Sagicor Group Jamaica. Joanna Banks, Chief Executive Officer, Pan Jam Investment Limited. Dr. Damian King, Executive Director, Caribbean Policy Research Institute. Karen Richards, Assistant Vice President, Investment Client Services, Sagicor Investments. Michael Willisey, Vice President, Corporate SME, Business Banking and Strategic Business Development, Sagicor Bank. Our friends joining us via our social media pages, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you for joining us today for Money Talks, the investor briefing series put on by Sagicor Investments Jamaica Limited to better equip current and future investors with information that you never have to settle for less than your dreams. This evening, we will be discussing the future of our country in relation to the recently presented national budget and its impact on investors. The fiscal decisions presented in the budget will impact the public sector, the private sector, and ordinary Jamaicans who are looking for ways to financially secure their future. Today, we'll be discussing how different aspects of the budget are expected to impact the manufacturing and processing sector, especially as it seeks to rebound from the COVID-19 pandemic, and how the spending power of average Jamaican in response to the budget and the macroeconomy. To bring it closer to home, we'll also be looking at how the financial sector is being impacted by the budget and how financial institutions, such as those within Sagicor Group, are responding. Of course, as with all our investor briefings, we will be sharing some key tips and strategies based on our research to help you along your investment journey. From the 44% minimum wage increase to the long-awaited infrastructural development of St. Thomas, the national budget can give many hints to consider when making your investment choices. Before doing that, however, it is important to understand how changes like these will have a long-term effect on the country and its citizens. While many of us closely follow the budget debates, such as these, and the complex web of how one fiscal decision can have a lasting impact, we know that many investors truly and understandably so just have one question answered. How does all of this affect my investment, and how can I reduce the risk to my portfolio during these times? History has shown that the budget changes affect our economy in different ways. For example, how the government spends and invests money affects the fiscal deficit. The extent of the deficit and the means of financing it influences the money supply and the interest rate in the economy. So, how does the everyday investor with stocks here and there prepare himself or herself for economic changes on the local market in relation to the new budget? This is part of what our expert panelists will be examining tonight. This special investor briefing is designed to assist you in clearing up many misconceptions you have, as well as providing insights needed to make wise investment decisions. Sagicor Investments Jamaica Limited remains committed to helping you, our investors, to think wealth, and we are always happy to guide you to realizing your dreams. Our aim is to equip you with tools needed to navigate the markets and share insights into the expected trajectory of our economy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sagicor Investments Investor Briefing Money Talks. Be sure to save your questions for our panelists and please enjoy the proceedings.
Thank you, Mishka. Mishka McLeod-Hines. Well, let's get it going. And you heard our panelists. We're going to begin with Michael Willesee. First question to you, Michael. The budget refers to grants and programs geared towards startup companies. Yes? What impact do you foresee for Jamaican startups? And will Sagicor be providing additional support to SMEs this financial year?
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. This is a bold move and a great one by the government. If I take you through the process of the cycle of a small business, it starts with existence, then you talk about just survival, and then you look at success. Then one after that is really growth, and then maturity. Now, as bankers, one of the things that we have to recognize is that for small businesses or startups to succeed, you have to give it the appropriate funding. So the government having introduced this sort of venture capital funding, it's important for startups. That is where we could probably prolong or give them a better survival rate. So I commend that. Now, with respect to Sagicor and Sagicor Bank, we have always been supporting startups. You would recall 2 years ago we started the Business Resource Center. And what we have been doing there is that we have been provided what they call training, significant training for startups, where we equip them with the necessary skills to survive. On the small business side also, we have designed products specifically for their growth depending on the cycle, where they are in terms of their stage of growth.
Thank you, Michael. And let me remind our audience, Michael Willesee is the Vice President, Corporate SME Business Banking and Strategic Business Development at Sagicor. We also have to my immediate left the Chief Executive Officer and President of Sagicor Group, Christopher Zaka. To his left, we have with us the CEO of Panjam Investments Jamaica Limited and Chair for Sagicor Investments, Ms. Joanna, no, I'm getting this wrong. Yeah? Joanna Banks, that's you. Okay, good. Come on. Executive Director of CAPRI, Caribbean Policy Research Institute, Dr. Damien King. We have to his left, Assistant Vice President, Investment Client Services at Sagicor, Ms. Karen Richards, and of course, Michael Willesee. And we're here, as you heard from Mishka, to look at the budget, the 2023 budget. It has been hailed as a historic budget, as it is Jamaica's first $1 trillion budget. It's actually only 2.3% more than the $998 billion budget for financial year 22-23. This budget is expected to impact Jamaicans, business sectors, and investments in the country in a major way. Sagicor Investments Jamaica is committed to engaging its clients and the public to educate and update them on the changing investment conditions, outlook, and opportunities for the year ahead. It's on this premise that Sagicor Investments are hosting the annual MoneyTalks investor briefing. They are here in full force with all the experts. Ladies and gentlemen, this one, as it was in previous year, will be no different, but better. We have gathered here for you a team of experts who are knowledgeable and able to share with you on the 23-24 national budget and investments. We began with Michael. So let's get to you again, Michael. Another one on housing. It was a major part of the budget. The Prime Minister announced a number of developments in the housing sector, yes, including over the next 4 years, the HAJ, the Housing Association of Jamaica, or Agency of Jamaica, is projecting approximately 10,000 housing starts and just over 6,000 deliveries to be constructed in St. Catherine, St. Elizabeth, St. James, and Trelawney. He also announced that an applicant, NHD applicant, will now get loan limits increase up to $1.5 million increase, joint applicants $2 million, and 3 co-applicants $1.5 million. It's a long run-up. The question is, how do you expect these changes, where housing is concerned, to affect the mortgage industry? And what role can the financial sector play in improving home ownership in Jamaica?
What is it going to do? Those changes will bring opportunities to more people to get into the mortgage market. Greater accessibility funds through the NHD. And certainly the commercial banks will be expecting what I call an upsurge. And I'm not, well, let me look at it, because there's one other factor that I need to talk about, just to balance the argument. Certainly, you'll have more persons coming in because they can access more. 3 persons can get up to 21 million. Now 2 can get up to 15. If you actually, 2 of you trying to get mortgages under 12 million, there's access there as well, particularly if it's a NHD scheme. So there's greater access. Now, with respect to the commercial banks, you did mention that we are now looking at a special program with NHG where we're moving away from joint financing, and there's now a partnership. And what that will actually do is to give the NHG much more money in order to put more units out there. One of the challenges that has been happening is that there's a question of affordability of the homes, although there's still access. The cost is going up, inflation, and that has become the challenge. However, the commercial banks, in joining with the NHG in this partnership and allowing them to have much more funds, will allow them to work with developers to bring units on the market that are at a better point, cheaper, lower cost. Because you will realize that, or recognize that, roughly 66% of the NHG contributors earn under $30,000 per week, which is basically they are the ones contributing. Mm-hmm. And that is where the challenge is really. Now, for the commercial banks, unfortunately, interest rates have gone up because of government monetary policies. Well, what we have done at Sagicor Bank and Sagicor Group is that we are looking at different ways of how do we fund young persons or persons in the market.
The government has a target to increase energy from renewable sources to 50% of total energy produced by 2030. The current budget includes a 30% income tax for installation of solar power generating systems costing up to 4 million J for residential users. While this is being welcomed, what actions can the private sector take to help accelerate this energy initiative?
One of the things that was, for me, that was not present in the budget, and this is where I think the bank, private sectors, is that there is, when you look at the developed world, in order to help in this regard with respect to renewable energy, we're looking at the issue of green housing. That is something that was not mentioned in the budget. And let me tell you where I'm going. Renewables, which is a big part of the government plan, which they want to bring on board, looking at wind, solar, hydro, powers, and batteries, battery storage, is that when you look at the level of construction, because we talked about housing a while ago, population is increasing, so we need more houses. However, if you look at the statistics across the world, you'll see that roughly 38% of the building and construction industry about 38% contribute to greenhouse gases, and 35% contribute to total energy cost. So what is important is the question is, how do we bring down that sort of greenhouse emission in order to maintain sustainability? And that is where we're talking about the issue of green building. And green building starts from design. How do you design the building? How do you retrofit the building for energy saving? And I'm saying that at Sagicor, these are policies that we are looking at in terms of bringing that to the market. I saw where the government has actually now going to penalize construction developers with respect to their waste. I'm saying that there's more in terms of policy that could be put out in terms of how they build to make it more economically friendly, environmentally friendly. And at Sagicor Bank, we'll be putting out products to sort of encourage developers to build in a particular way that will help to sustain what I call this world.
Thank you very much, Michael Willesee, Vice President, Corporate SME Business Banking and Strategic Business Development. Well, the Minister of Finance, Dr. Nigel Clark, mentioned several plans for reforming and further enhancing the strength of the financial sector in his presentation to Christopher Zaka, the President and CEO. What are your views on these planned reforms outlined by the Finance Minister in the budget?
So first of all, Cliff, and good evening, everybody, and thank you for hosting this event. First of all, let me say that the financial sector in Jamaica is sound. And our regulatory bodies are strong. The reforms that have been announced will only serve to further enhance the strength of our regulatory sector and give confidence to investors in the financial sector, especially in volatile times where the world is in a cycle of volatility right now. So we at Sagicor fully support the reforms outlined by the Minister, which can only serve to bring greater transparency to the financial sector in terms of investors, in terms of savers, in terms of all stakeholders. In particular, I was particularly pleased to see that they're moving to strengthen penalties around manipulation of stock pricing by insiders. Our stock market has done well for many years, and it is extremely important that it continues to enjoy the confidence of investors in Jamaica. In terms of the other regulations around investment banking, etc., as long as the regulators don't major in minors, we support all of them.
Let me ask you, Mr. President, the issues recently with SSL, yes? The minister announced that he's going to the Twin Peak regulatory format. What's your position on that?
I've personally supported that format for years, and I've been advocating for one single regulator for all financial sector in terms of capital adequacy, liquidity, and prudency and solvency. So I support that, and the current interim structure where the Bank of Jamaica has board-level oversight over the FSC, I think is a good one, and it's a progressive step on the path to the single regulator. The FSC being a market conduct regulator is also a very good step because it can focus on making sure that what people tell the investing public is accurate, is transparent, and does not mislead them. So I like the concept a lot.
What say you on that, Dr. King?
Thank you, Cliff. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
One has to recognize that every sector, and especially the financial sector, is a dynamic marketplace which is always evolving with new instruments and new forms of organization. So it follows that good regulation requires reforming those regulations from time to time. And that's actually what we're seeing in Jamaica. So we are not to view regulatory reform as something extraordinary and necessarily an admission of a failure in the past. And what we are seeing here is exactly that as the financial sector has evolved, then it requires a different form of regulation. And what we are seeing here in particular is a recognition that regulation now ought not to be by type of financial institution, because financial institutions of different types are now connected within groups, and regulating instead by functions. So it is a perfectly adequate and sensible response to the changing structure of the financial sector, and it's going to lead to more comprehensive oversight of their activities and lower the likelihood of crises and failures.
And we have had examples of other economies going this route.
Indeed. This has happened in the UK, it has happened in South Africa, it has happened in New Zealand. Those are some of the countries that are shifting to this Twin Peaks model of financial regulation.
Good. Joanna Banks is CEO of Panjam Investment Limited. Joanna, your question. Given the large infrastructure projects announced over the next few years and the GOJ's policy to reduce the debt to GDP over the medium term, what role do you see the financial sector playing in making these projects a reality and coming in on budget?
That's a good question. Good evening, Cliff. Good evening, everyone else joining us online. Good evening to my fellow panelists. What role can the financial sector play? And I would say after the government, frankly, the biggest one, which is why we're here tonight, right? So companies like Sagicor Group Jamaica, and I'll say specifically, no pressure, Mike, Sagicor Group Jamaica play an enormous role in ensuring that infrastructure projects, large or small, can be funded, right? And so we as Sagicor Group Jamaica, as Sagicor Bank, Sagicor Investments, play an enormous role in ensuring that there is funding, that there is guidance in terms of budget. Of course, when you have a bank or an investment company involved providing funding, you have oversight of budgets in order to repay debt or equity holders for infrastructure projects. So at this point, I would say we are a crucial element of infrastructure projects.
For my listeners, viewers who are engaging us this evening,
Yes.
One of the big issues, the complaints we get it. The country needs these big infrastructural development projects to grow and to make our lives more easy, convenient. But the inconveniences, for example, the roadworks going to the east, can't they be a little bit more customer friendly, user friendly? Yeah, you don't have a role in that, do you?
No, I was going to say I don't have a role in that, but we could get one of the ministers in here to answer. No, I don't, but I agree with you 100% that part of infrastructure projects, of course, one is funding, but two, that they are all long-term, right? So at the end of the day, we have to, as citizens, believe in long-term viability of infrastructure projects and that they'll pay off in terms of reduced debt to equity, growth, productivity, add to jobs, etc. But it takes patience.
From where you sit, Joanna, what changes in the current regulatory framework would improve the delivery of public-private partnerships?
That's easy. Legislation
Easy.
and less bureaucracy. Easy for me to say it, very hard to implement, right? I'll tell you that. But as part of public-private partnerships or PPPs, part of it is to ensure that they are not easy to do, but accessible to the private sector who wants to participate in them, that there's a transparent process that you go through in order to be in a PPP, that you're held accountable for it, that the risks that go to the private sector and public sector are clear, and that there's, of course, accountability as you go through the PPP to ensure that everything is done correctly, up to standard, so that, of course, for the next PPP, the public-private sector is confident that we know what we're doing.
You said less bureaucracy.
Red tape.
Red tape.
Yes.
Specifically, like what we could eliminate or do better?
Oh, that's all of it.
Huh?
No, I think a big part of it is the approval process, right? Is making the approval process transparent, knowing exactly what you need to be approved to be part of these partnerships, so that when you submit to participate, you know exactly what you're getting into. I think that's a crucial part of it.
All right. The government has also announced the establishment of a national disaster
You're
fund.
treating me like Mike Willisey. But please, go ahead.
A national disaster fund, an income tax relief, large-scale projects and pioneering industries act, plus the ongoing plans for modernizing the Customs Act and regulations. Tell me, how does all of that impact business or the productive sector?
No, incredibly positively. So we'll go one by one, right? So the NDF, or the National Disaster Fund, of course, speaks to resiliency in the economy, right? So we as citizens can really think to ourselves that once we have this fund in place and it is reliable, that we can think that the economy is resilient through whatever the world may throw our way. And of course, in time of climate change, it becomes more and more likely that that will happen. The second one, which is income tax relief for large projects, that's a no-brainer, right? Anything that can get the private sector to invest in large projects, infrastructure, or pioneer industries, etc., can only be a boom for the industry. Even if you take into consideration that there may be less tax income for it, right? Anything that can get investment, both domestic and foreign, into Jamaica is a plus for us. And the Customs Act, modernizing the Customs Act, making it easier for trade to come in and out of Jamaica, also extremely beneficial, makes foreign direct investment a lot more attractive. And of course, for us, for manufacturers here, it also is a very big boom to the economy. So all in all, I would say all three are incredibly positive.
Let me hear Chris Zaka on that as well.
Yeah, I support what Joanna said. I think it's a great set of steps towards infrastructural development. And if you don't mind, I'd like to give Sagicor and Panjam a plug.
Sure.
So right now we are in the process, and Mishka is here, of raising debt to the tune of about $9 billion to support the new Rio Cobre water treatment plant, which will be totally privately funded on the equity and debt side. The new Panjam are investors on the equity side. Sagicor has committed up to $4.5 billion of our own funds towards this $9 billion debt raise. And that will be a game changer. The Prime Minister announced it in his budget speech. A lot more treated water coming into Kingston and the metropolitan area around Kingston in the next few years. As we know, we don't have enough water right now. When there's a drought, we have problems. So that stifles growth, both in housing and in commercial activities. Another project that we just announced, and Mike led that.
But just to be clear, how you make back your money?
How we make back the money?
Yes. You're not the National Water Commission.
Joanna has to pay her debt off every month.
Yes.
And the way they do that is that the company that will build and operate the plant
Yes.
Will charge the Water Commission a tariff.
Good.
And that tariff will be regulated by the contract and by the OUR. So it's regulated.
It's not my personal debt.
No, it's the new Panjam's debt. There's also another external partner, Vinci Construction, the largest construction company in the world, which is going to be building the plant and be an equity holder in the plant and operating it. So it's a fantastic project. I was going to say
What's
that...
the timeline on it?
Mishka, what's the timeline?
She says before the end of the year, they're hoping to break ground.
And then a couple of years of construction.
Okay.
2 years, yeah, that's couple is 2. So we also are financing another big announcement with the Prime Minister. And again, I think the new Panjam is involved in it in terms of the dry dock, Kingston Dry Dock, which is a major infrastructure project to be able to service large ships in a dry dock facility. Logistics hub is our mantra for the last few years, and this is one big part of it. So in terms of infrastructure, Joanna said it, Sagicor Group plays a major role in developing infrastructure in this country, and the move by the government to bring the private sector in through various mechanisms is something that the entire country should applaud.
Dr. King, I want to hear you on this, because there has been a debate in the country on this very issue. Should the government be tweaking that main emphasis on reducing the debt, getting it below 60%, the international benchmark, 60% of GDP? Dr. Clark told us we're actually running ahead of our projection. While there's another view, yes, that says slow down on reducing the debt, spend more on cushioning, alleviating the difficulties in the country. Yes? Tell me, where do you come down on that?
Thank you, Cliff. So I'm not going to answer the question, but I'm going to respect the question and tell you why it's a really important question for the country to ask and to debate. What does it mean that you're reducing your debt too quickly? Well, think of it this way. You have some surplus funds this year. Reducing the debt is one of the ways that you can invest those surplus funds. But there are other possibilities as well. You could, instead of paying down debt on which you are going to have to pay interest, you could invest it in some other way and earn the return on that investment. So, for example, the country still has great infrastructural needs. And when it invests in that infrastructure, there is a return on it, like the water project, like other highway projects, like anything that is going to increase the capacity of the country to grow and have a higher GDP and higher levels of income. So what a government has to do is to say, if I pay off this debt, I'm saving myself 8% interest, 9% interest, 10% interest. But if I invest in a capital expenditure project, if the return on that investment is greater than that 10%, then it makes sense for you to not pay down the debt and to earn the relatively higher return. Or social expenditures, expenditures that ease the burden of the living standards of the neediest in the society, which also has economic consequences. So it's a critical question about how quickly you pay down the debt. And that analysis has to be done. It is not obvious that paying down the debt as fast as you possibly can is the best way to do it. But the analysis has to be done, and I personally have not done that analysis, so I can't give you a conclusion to say, yes, we are paying it down too fast, or we should pay it down even faster. But it's an important question for the society to answer and for the fiscal managers to answer.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. King. Right? We're now up on a break. Yes? We're going to take a break. And of course, remember, you can follow the discussion through our hashtags, hashtag MoneyTalks, Sagicor Investments, and hashtag Investor Briefing. Okay?
One-on-One is really a company that provides individualized learning for all. We were demanded to solve problems not only in schools, but also companies and at a government level across the Caribbean. And so, we went to Sagicor and they were able to structure a deal through Sagicor Capital Markets, through Sagicor Investment, that allowed us the funding that was well needed.
1&1 is a technology company that fuels education. Sagicor believes in this vision and therefore we invested in the company. Most recently, we led the company during their IPO process.
The IPO was an immense success. We raised close to about $3 billion, and certainly we're looking forward to even broadening this, and Sagicor Investments will take us there.
Thank you so much, and thank you for staying with us here on our Money Talks Investor Briefing and Forum by Sagicor Investments. We have the experts with us, Mr. Christopher Zaka, President and CEO of Sagicor Group Jamaica, Joanna Banks, Chief Executive Officer, Panjam Investment Limited, Dr. Damien King, Executive Director of the Caribbean Policy Research Institute, CAPRI, Karen Richards, Assistant Vice President, Investment Client Services at Sagicor Investments, Michael Willisey, Vice President, Corporate SME Business Banking and Strategic Business Development. All right, so we now go to the issue of what is the ideal debt to GDP ratio for Jamaica to achieve economic success. Which one of the panelists would like to take that? That's Winston. That's a question from Winston. What is the ideal debt to GDP ratio for Jamaica to achieve economic success? Dr. King.
No matter how optimistic you are and what are the prospects you see for your own investments or for the economy, the speed at which you are going to run towards that pot of gold that you see at the end of the rainbow is going to be determined by how close you are to the precipice. Because that is the risk of running fast towards the pot of gold. As Karen mentioned, for much of the last quarter century, the debt that Jamaica had, which at times was up as far as 145% of GDP, and which required a debt service that at its peak was occupying half of tax revenue to service, represented a tremendous risk to the economy, to investors, to individual investors, and to business investors who wanted to invest in fixed capital. So you really don't want to put down money for a long-term investment if in any given year the government is so close to default that you are just taking on too great a risk. The tremendous thing that has happened in Jamaica, and when I say tremendous, I mean a world-leading thing that this country has managed, is to reduce its debt by approaching half without defaulting on principal over the last 8 to 9 years under 2 administrations. And what that has done is that it has now taken us quite a distance away from that precipice, from that risk of making investments. And so we are now much different and a much better economic climate for that reason. So it's not a matter of picking a particular number. It is recognizing that the further and further away we are from that precipice is the better off we are. And we have come a really long way. We still have a ways to go. There's a kind of a rough benchmark of 60% of GDP being, the ideal of what is infinitely sustainable. But rather than focusing on we are still 20 percentage points away from 60, it is to recognize how far we have come and how much better an economic climate we're in because of it.
Yes. Mr. President?
How much better an investment climate.
Yes. Mr. President, on that?
No, I have nothing to add. I'm really enjoying Dr. King tonight.
What say you, Joanna?
He has mellowed in his old age, I must say. And I fully support everything he has said.
Okay, Joanna?
I would agree, and I would say that actually Dr. King in his previous answer would have said it actually does depend on the analysis, right? On what the return is, what the risk is, and for someone to actually present that analysis in a comprehensive way.
Michael, do you concur?
I concur. And if you looked at the post-COVID recovery, if you look at that graph, it was V-shaped. And we were able to recover faster than a lot of developing countries because of the fiscal space and the level of reserve that we had. So I commend what is being done and reducing, and that can only serve us well in the future. So I commend it.
I'm a teacher at heart. So when you say look at that post-pandemic recovery graph, V-shape.
Yes.
Dr. King, you're the teacher here. V-shape, we dived in a very steep way, and we climbed out even, more steep. So down, up, right?
We are talking about how not having a high public debt gives us, reduces the risk that we face from shocks. In that context, we were talking about relatively small shocks that can have a big impact on a small economy, like international interest rates go up by a couple of percentage points, or we get hit by a particularly severe hurricane. Well, 3 years ago, we didn't have a minor shock that had a big impact on a small economy. We had the biggest external fiscal and economic shock that has ever taken place since we started recording economic data. And this country survived it and was able to have and is experiencing a strong V-shaped recovery precisely because that resilience was put in place. If that pandemic had come along before we had a disaster relief fund, before we had brought down our debt to GDP ratio to close to 100%, if it had taken place when we were at 145%, it would have been a catastrophe to living standards in Jamaica, the likes of which it has never experienced.
A catastrophe.
So we've already benefited from building that resilience into our economy.
Thank you. Our next question from the public. How has the 23-24 budget contributed positively to Jamaican retirees maintaining their post-retirement standard of living? Shouldn't the retiree income tax threshold be increased to, say, $2.5 million? That's from Magdalena. Mr. President.
For too many years in this country, retirees' living standards have been devastated by inflation. And for the last, what is it now, Damien, about 10 years? The move by successive administrations to apply fiscal prudence and prudent macroeconomic management has reduced inflation. And that, to me, is one of the best ways to promote the living standards of retirees. And we have had some hiccups in the last few months, the last year, due to external shocks, but we're getting back on track, in my view. And I think the response of the central bank has been adequate in that respect. Now, the other way to promote the income of retirees and ensure a better living standard for retirees is to promote the use of pensions or approved retirement schemes if you're not part of a formal pension scheme. We have very low penetration in this country in the pension sphere and in the retirement scheme sphere. It's growing. People don't realize, I think, that by contributing as part of your earnings, you can save significantly on income tax in your earning years to the benefit of your retirement years. And I think it's a job that's, we are the largest pension fund managers in the country. We control about a third of the total pension funds, and we sell a lot of individual retirement schemes to clients. But we need to do, everybody, all of us, our competitors and us, need to do a better job of explaining to citizens why saving now for the future, especially in a low inflation environment, is far more sensible, I want to say, or prudent than spending all of what you earn now and then retiring without a nest egg there.
Yeah, good. And I hope we answered Magdalena's question. She seemed to be focusing on why not raise the income tax threshold for retirees to $2.5 million. Joanna, Karen?
I'm happy to try, but I think it comes exactly back to what Dr. King has said, is increasing the threshold, frankly, any threshold, not just for pensioners, comes down to the analysis of what the costs and benefits are of doing that, both to the individual and to the country. And as Chris has said very well, is that the truth is, the trade-off is, as an individual, is investing early, getting the tax benefits as an individual early, getting the benefits of compounding for your retirement as well, and then reaping those benefits after you retire.
Okay, good. Here's a question from Marcia. And Marcia, if I read the question as is, I think we need to do some interpretation of it. Marcia says, what are the BRICS? Brazil, Russia, India, and China group. How does it affect the US dollar and by extension us as Jamaicans investing in US currency? I think Marcia might be alluding to the effort of the Brazil and China and Russia to move away from the international reserve currency, that is the US, yes? If I may interpret what she's asking. Dr. King?
So for more than a half a century, in fact, almost a century, the US dollar has been the international currency. All transactions within any economic sphere has to have a common currency, that which you receive for your payments and that which others are willing to accept from you when you buy from them.
Right.
And domestic currencies do that within economies. Internationally, there has to be a currency, and the US dollar has performed that role. But many large economies, the ones identified in the question, Russia, China, India, Brazil, and others, are recognizing that they are exposing themselves to a geopolitical risk when they rely on the US dollar. And so each of them, in their own way, are trying to shift away from that dependency. Mm-hmm. That is going to have consequences for every economy in the world, mostly for the United States. Mm-hmm. Because Americans are able to live somewhat above the standard of living that they produce, because everybody else in the world is willing to save in US dollars. So when people in the rest of the world start to de-dollarize, start to hold their savings in other forms, not only individuals, but central banks, then that means that Americans are now going to have to start doing the opposite, which is consuming below the standard of living implied by their production. So that's a consequence for them. But for us as well, it means that the US dollar becomes a less valuable international currency. Mm-hmm. I still think we are far away from the US dollar becoming, not the major international currency. So it's not the kind of risk that we need to be concerned about with our savings accounts now or our investment accounts.
Okay.
So it's a trend that is picking up and has accelerated because of the American reaction to the war in Ukraine.
Yes.
And using the US dollar as part of its sanctions against Russia. Mm. So countries are no more concerned about dependence on the US dollar.
Yes.
So even though that concern and that trend is accelerating, we are likely still far away from us in Jamaica having a big concern about the role of the US dollar.
And this is a classic example of the global geopolitical tensions between a rising China, right, and America, who feels that it is under threat, that it is on the side of democracy versus autocracy, yeah?
And China feeling that it is under threat
Yes.
from America's insistence on a unipolar world. So we are really coming out of a period of geopolitical calmness for the last several decades and increasing globalization to a very different kind of international political and economic world.
Good. Next question. Though the Jamaican debt to GDP ratio is heading in the right direction, I have not heard the Prime Minister nor the opposition leader say anything about agriculture. Agriculture, says this viewer, should be the driving force to stimulate growth in the rural areas. This would stem the rural to urban migration problem and slow down crime by having meaningful employment for the young. Alfred, who is going to take that one? Christopher Zaka.
Maybe Mikey can jump in after to
Yes.
say what we are doing about promoting agricultural investment. I totally agree with, is it Alfred?
Alfred.
Yeah, totally agree with him. And it comes back to infrastructural development. So for years, there's been talk about the potential agriculture has to replace imports, to create employment. I think it's about infrastructure. It's availability of water, which means infrastructure. It's the availability of good farm roads, which means infrastructure. It's the availability of technological support. So it's no longer the machete and the hoe, it's greenhouses. And how do you promote, for example, community-type investments in agriculture? And I would think the last piece, Cliff, is about value add. So not just growing the product, what do you transform those products into? And how do we promote investments in manufacturing, et cetera, to do that? So I think it's a big, low-hanging fruit. Droughts don't help at all, so the investment in water and irrigation infrastructure is very, very important.
Good. Michael?
Yeah, what we have seen through the commercial bank is that there's greater interest in agriculture, but it's in a much more organized and sophisticated way. One of the drawbacks, particularly though, for small farmers and really for bankers, is really the issue of getting insurance. That is a drawback. And that is but notwithstanding, what we have found is that the issue of agri-processing is on the rise. If you look at now where the US now, there's mangoes being exported to the United States. So those are what I call significant development. So I'm not disagreeing with Alfred, but certainly the government did mention stuff on agriculture. Didn't get into it much, but this country certainly is blessed in terms of our land. And certainly there's much more that can be done. However, when you're talking about exporting to North America, we need scale. Scale is important for us to make a meaningful impact in terms of our trade in the agricultural sector.
Okay.
Yes.
We have another question from Cheryl. And Cheryl is asking, do the macroeconomic indicators support continued growth above 3%? Or, in your candid opinion, will it go back to the usual 1% growth that we have seen for so long in Jamaica?
When you consider what the Jamaican economy looked like 10 years ago, before the country started on its many economic reforms, the fiscal responsibility, the independence and inflation targeting of the central bank, the infrastructural investment, the improvements in the ease of doing business, and that we have sustained those reforms now for almost 10 years. We have not yet seen the dividend in terms of economic growth of those reforms. One reason is that we got knocked down by the pandemic. Another reason is what we mentioned earlier about the deterioration in the international geopolitical environment and a certain amount of deglobalization and the consequences for commodity prices and shipping of the war in Ukraine. But notwithstanding all of that, the potential for economic growth in Jamaica coming out of our 10 years of economic reform is greater than 3% per year. And while it would be foolish to make a prediction about the other factors that we don't control, how long the Ukraine war is going to go on, and what other international events are going to get in the way. Notwithstanding that, I think an objectively defendable prediction or expectation is that those growth dividends are going to come at some point, and the potential for economic growth in Jamaica from this point onwards is greater than 3%.
Wow. And I see everybody shaking their heads in agreement.
Yes, let me just jump in just briefly. Chris spoke about the German shipyard, the dry dock. When you look at how this type of investment that are now coming into the country, moving away from what, not tourism is important, but we're diversifying our revenue stream, if you want to look at it from that simple way. That is encouraging, and that will continue to boost the type of growth that Dr. King spoke about.
Yeah. Okay, here's another one. Extrapolate the percentage increase in gross domestic product, GDP, relative to the percentage decrease in crime. Has that type of analysis or correlation ever been done? Yes, it was done some years ago by a World Bank study, right? Chris, Damien, Michael? That Jamaica was losing, for every percentage decrease in crime, we're losing something like 1-2% of GDP. Yeah? I can't recall the exact numbers.
Well, there have been a number of studies in recent decades looking at the causative relationship between crime levels and economic growth. And even though there's a fair amount of variation, it's significant that if we were to reduce our crime levels to levels that were even the international average, it would have a significant effect on economic growth.
Yes. All right. Okay, we're going to take a break now, and then when we come back, we're going to get local equity watch, yes, some tips on how to invest, what stocks to back or not, or what class of stocks, okay? Stay with us.
As a woman in business, we're usually the planners, we're usually the organizers. Our maternal instincts as well helps a lot in terms of, just galvanizing the troops, getting us together. I always just wanted to be the best person that I could be, and it so happened that it led me into entrepreneurship. The relationship with Sagicor Bank began shortly after starting Senior Accounting Services Limited in 2016. And anything that we want to do, we're able to connect with someone who was willing to help and willing to help us get to, where we wanted to be. My Sagicor business banker has been phenomenal. She assists in any way possible. As a busy entrepreneur, she ensures that, whatever it is that we need to get done, she meets us halfway somehow. And over the next 10 years, we'll be developing our succession planning. We look forward to having Sagicor on board to assist us through this process.
When you build wealth with Sagicor Investments, you never have to settle for less than your dreams. Call 888 Sagicor to speak with a wealth advisor so Sagicor Investments can help you create, grow, and preserve your wealth. We invest every day in ourselves, our family and friends, investing our time and energy and our love. But at the end of the day, it's always worth it. That's how we'd like you to feel when you invest with us at Sagicor Investments. So we give you options like Sigma Global Funds, the largest and best performing in the industry, and stock brokerage with the lowest online trading fees. Because at the end of the day, We want you to feel like your investment was. When you build wealth with Sagicor Investments, you never have to settle for less than your dreams. Call 888 Sagicor to speak with a wealth advisor so Sagicor Investments can help you create, grow, and preserve your wealth.
Well, thank you for staying with us here at Money Talks, yes. And it's that time of the evening when we are going to give you your chance to win something, our social media giveaway questions. So question 1, if you are joining on Zoom, answer the question. What is the tagline for Sagicor Investments' newest campaign? If you're coming in on Zoom, what's the tagline for Sagicor Investments' newest campaign? Question 2, if you're joining on Instagram, answer the question. Name the 2 countries in which Sagicor Investments operates. Name the 2 countries in which Sagicor Investments operates. Okay? And that is if you are coming in on Instagram and you dropped the response in the comment section. Okay? If you're joining on Facebook, the question, name 3 things needed to open a stock brokerage account with Sagicor Investments. Name 3 things needed to open a stock brokerage account with Sagicor Investments. And of course, the winner will be announced towards the end of the evening. But we have another major presentation now, yes? We have with us today research and strategy analyst with Sagicor Investments, Jodian Aries. Jodian is here to explain how you can use the information shared this evening to expand your investment portfolio. Jodian, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening. I am Jodian, and I will be sharing with you today some of our equity picks as we head into Q2 of 2023. Let us start with a general overview of the local equities market, just a brief little overview. If you notice on the graph that has been displayed that there has been a dip in equity indices since the second half of 2022, and this has carried over into 2023. Among the factors that would have been impacting this performance has been higher interest rate environment. So what is typical for equity markets in such an environment is that investors will then do that comparison with what's available in the fixed income space, and sometimes there tend to be a little bit of a pullback. Also, the tight monetary policy has also heightened the risk that we could be seeing economic activities, falter a little bit. And this would then lead to possibly some amount of a reduction in profits for listed companies. Now, I know this might sound a little negative, but please don't panic. Your team here at Sagicor Investments, the research team, has been mandated to find opportunities for our clients in every possible scenario. And with that, I'll be taking you through what it is that you could possibly be invested in to reap some of those rewards. Here at Sagicor Investments, we do want our clients to remain invested and to continue to reap the returns that are on the equities market. Among the companies that I'll be sharing with you today, we're in about 3 sectors: manufacturing, finance, as well as the retail space. So since we have been talking quite a bit about the financial space, let's touch on the manufacturing to start out. Massey Holdings Limited is a conglomerate that cross-listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange in 2022. This company took a strategic move, and what they did was that they divested away from non-core operations in order to stimulate faster growth. And so while they had this strategic move working, in the last quarter of 2022, the company decided, hey, let's take on some acquisitions. And that they did. They take on about 3 big acquisitions in the last quarter of 2022. And this also is supposed to help in terms of seeing the possibility of higher profits. As such, we have, for this company, given it an overweight recommendation. And by overweight, I mean this is something that you can start to consider adding to your portfolio if you don't have it. And if you have it, have that discussion with your financial advisor, should I get a little bit more of it. Now, touching back on the financial space. So we have been talking about some of the positives in the financial space, a little bit of the negatives. One company that we have looked at is NCB Financial Group. And this company we have an overweight recommendation on, and it's largely due to the fact that there is the potential for higher earnings from this company, as well as that they have been expanding their reach across the Caribbean, and this could augur well for the company. When it is that we do our assessments, and we do rigorous assessments, we look at positive, we look at worst case scenarios, we estimate that this company is currently trading below its fair value, and as such is something that you could consider for your portfolio. Sticking in this financial space, we're also looking at VM Investments Limited. For this company, we have an underweight recommendation. And underweight means if it is that you have it in your portfolio, now is a time to look back at it, give it some consideration, and consider reducing your exposure to that company. Particularly for VM Investments Limited, it has very large of its revenue is dependent on the net interest income business line. And this business line is very sensitive to interest rates. So you can consider an environment where BOJ is going 50%, 50 basis points, 25 basis points, another 25, that it would have had some negative impact for the company. Now, there are other positives that the company has been doing. They have been diversifying away from dependence on net interest income. However, our estimation is that the return to strong growth is a little bit further out than we'd like. So we're seeing a return to growth in around 2024 as opposed to 2023. And as such, we have given it an underweight recommendation. Now, touching on to Jamaica Broilers Group. Now, for avid viewers of Sagicor Investments Money Talks, you may recall that last year this time we spoke about Jamaica Broilers. And yes, it had an overweight recommendation. At that time, the stock was trading at about $28, $27. Currently, we're seeing it trading above that $35 mark. And so for those who took that advice and got invested, kudos to you. However, there's still an opportunity. We are still expecting that we could see further growth for this company. And so if you didn't take a chance then, you could consider taking a chance now, as you are still overweight on this company. To wrap us up, we'll look at the retail space and we'll touch on Carreras Limited. Now, last year, one of the things we heard a lot of was supply chain disruptions. And a lot of retail companies felt a bit of a hang because of the supply chain disruptions. Carreras, however, even in that sort of environment, still provided or still recorded outstanding results. And they have further plans to improve their core business lines. And if this materializes, it could mean a little bit more for you as an investor who gets in onto Carreras. Another plus with Carreras is the dividend yield. Currently, that's around 9%, and that is very high in our market. It's among the highest, and so it is an option that we can look at. Now, as usual, this is just a teaser. It's just a little snippet of what it is that we do at the research team at Sagicor Investments. There's much more. Our wealth advisors are equipped with all this knowledge, plus way more, and are able to assist you. So my final recommendation for tonight is, before the week is out, reach out to your Sagicor Investments wealth advisor.
Thank you very much, Jody, and you're excellent at this. You're a pro. You're
a nervous pro.
They didn't know what was happening. They didn't know. Jodianne Aries, yes, Jodianne is research and strategy analyst with Sagicor Investments. And now we have another question here from a member of the public. I would like to start investing. Where can I go to get information on an investment portfolio that would suit my budget and lifestyle? And that's from Fabian.
Right, Cliff, I'll take that answer.
Okay.
Right. Well, thank you for that, because I echo that as well. However, I would strongly recommend that you contact one of our investment advisors. And as you know, Sagicor Investments has offices right across the island. We operate in at least 4 regions. So Sagicor, has everything for everyone. And more importantly, though, is that you must speak to an investment advisor to make any investment decisions that you're planning on. And we start with even providing budgeting advice and certainly, engaging you to ensure that you have the requisite risk tolerance so that when we have sufficient information to guide you and to ensure also that it meets the timeline that you're looking at. All right, so I'm really looking forward to having, you all, if you're interested, come speak to us, and also you can really reach out to us through our website.
And a member of the public who asked, that's Karen Richards. She's the Assistant Vice President for Investment Client Services at Sagicor. Okay? So that's her, Karen. Ask her Karen. Huh? Here's another question for you. The proposed budget, it's no longer a proposed budget. It's the budget now. It's been passed. The budget is operating with a surplus, which is a good indication. But how would you rate the 23-24 budget? Beginning with, I'm going down the line. Beginning with you, Mr. Zaka. How would you rate the budget?
I think it's a good budget. I think that we're starting to reap the benefits of the proper fiscal management over the last 10 years. And I think the government has shifted to spending more on infrastructure, spending more on social services, etc., which clearly we have had. I mean, Damien has spoken about the trade-offs of debt reduction versus spending on investment returns. So social spending brings returns, in my view. And I think it's a good budget. I give it a good grade, A.
You give it an A?
Yeah.
Okay. Joanna, there was a time when in my craft, the question we would be asking, is it credible? Yeah? Is it credible? Yeah? Is it credible? Is it good? What?
I think it is a credible and good budget. I think the great part about this budget, and I would say for some previous budgets as well, is it lays a very strong foundation for economic growth. So the government has put in place a number of initiatives, starting with fiscal reform for the past decade, some also represented in this budget, and it puts a foundation that encourages and incentivizes the private sector to play their part in Jamaica's future. And there's really nothing more that we can ask from the government in that regard.
Dr. Damien King, experience again. Where is the argument that we would have had some years ago about the foreign exchange rate? Yeah? Well, how is that factored in the budget? Can we hold it? Is it going to run away? Yeah? How would you rate the budget, especially within the context, at least? We're not having those discussions anymore.
Well, as long as we're giving plugs, let me do one of my own. Capri has just completed its analysis of the budget.
Oh.
We are going to be launching that shortly.
But give us the scoop.
Giving an assessment. And I should say that Capri is able to do its independent and objective analysis of the budget thanks to the companies that, in an exercise of corporate social responsibility, supports our work. Sagicor is one, and Panjam is another one. The most important thing you want to know about a fiscal budget is that it is consistent with prudence and responsibility over the long run. If you extrapolate its implications and just multiply it forward over a number of years, does the government and the economy get into trouble, with rising debt or unsustainable fiscal deficits? And this is a budget that continues our recent tradition of fiscal responsibility and long-run sustainability. That is why the debt is coming down. And a good measure of that, a good single measure of that, is the share of revenue devoted to servicing debt. And when I say just interest alone, not amortization, we are coming from 10 years ago when it averaged 40% of revenue going to pay interest. 7 years ago, it was 25% of revenue going to paying interest. In the new budget, it is 17% of revenue paying interest. So we are unquestionably going in the direction that we want to go in terms of fiscal management.
Thank you. Karen, how would you rate the budget?
It's an excellent budget, and what comes out for me is the infrastructural and other development growth initiatives that lays the foundation for the private sector, the small investor, everyone to participate in that economy.
Thank you. Michael Willisey, you opened the batting. You're going to be the closer. The closer.
Yes, well, there's nothing much I can add, but Dr. King, Mr. Zaka has spoken. But as a Jamaican, I'm very pleased with how the country is going. I'm very pleased with the budget. I'm very pleased with the government alignment with even the academic community. I see where they're talking about fiscal council. I see where the minister is talking about, the finance minister is talking about sponsoring public sector debt management programs at the University of the West Indies. All of this augurs very well for a very bright future for Jamaica.
Thank you, Michael. Well, to the answers for our social media questions, if you came in on Zoom, yes? The question, what is the tagline for Sagicor Investments' newest campaign? The answer, never settle for less than your dreams. Never settle for less than your dreams. Okay? Question 2, if you came in on Instagram, name the 2 countries in which Sagicor Investments operate. Cayman Islands and Jamaica. Yes, Cayman Islands and Jamaica. And question 3, if you joined us via Facebook, name 3 things needed to open a stock brokerage account with Sagicor Investments. Well, any of the following: a valid photo ID, TRN, that's your tax registration number, proof of your address, proof of income, or your last 3 pay slips, 2 references, and a completed JCSD mandate form. What is JCSD? What does that stand for? Yes?
So, Cliff, that's the Jamaica Centralized Securities Depository.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Karen. Well, congratulations to all our winners. And ladies and gentlemen, it has indeed been an insightful evening, one of learning, yes, but also sharing. I want to say thanks to all of our panelists, Chris Zaka, Joanna Banks, Damon King, Karen Richards, Michael Willisey, and our presenters, Jody and Aries and Mishka. Thank you very much for starting us off, Mishka. It has been my pleasure hosting and being the traffic cop another evening. Thanks to our viewers on Zoom, Instagram, and Facebook. And your investment choice, Sagicor. Until next time, I'm your host, Cliff Hughes.
Ourselves, our family and friends, investing our time and energy and our love. But at the end of the day, it's always worth it. That's how we'd like you to feel when you invest with us at Sagicor Investments. So we give you options like Sigma Global Funds, the largest and best performing in the industry, and stock brokerage with the lowest online trading fees. Because at the end of the day, we want you to feel like your investment was worth it.